Memories are like echoes that rewrite past patterns and structures in the brain. Thoughts are like waves that move through structures that have been built up in the past or are building and structuring out of itself at the moment of thinking. Sometimes I observe myself thinking and can see how my memories associate from one pattern to another pattern. I look at my bicycle and the pattern that emerged from the observation is similar to a pattern that emerged in a past observation. The structure of a past observation then associates with something someone said near the time when the structure was building up in the mind. So I associate from the pattern of the current observation to a similar past structure. These can be quite banal things. For example, I look at my bike and associate it with that I once parked it when I visited friends for grilling. From that moment, I associate that someone asked me if I want some more potato salad. From there, the thoughts run to a further structure, which was built up during the observation and processing of the event. Once, when I wanted to hand someone my plate to be refilled, I accidentally knocked over my glass. Then even the sensations that took place at that time are triggered again. In this case, shame for having spilled my drink. All events that have happened have been reflected as patterns and have written themselves into structures in the memory of the brain, because neurons have linked up when they observed the event. Parts of the connections and bridges have remained. Memories are echoes that appear when electrical impulses move through structures that were formed in the past, just as sound waves move through vaults. The sound waves are like the energetic impulses, the chaos. The vault is like the logical structures that have been built, the order. If I think too much about thinking, everything transmutes into non-physical structures and waves that move through it. Our mind is like a time travel machine through which we can travel into the past. Not literally, but we look at the echoes of past reaction chains that have structured in the brain. This is what distinguishes a higher developed brain, like that of a human, from a lower one, like that of a bug. If algorithms are very simple, then they have no place to relight past patterns so that they can take place again. Simple algorithms are also limited in their ability to look into the future through logical reasoning. If consciousness develops higher and higher from a unicellular organism, the frame of perception of time grows too. The past and the future can then be seen, by memories or logical conclusions. By looking at an apple lying on the ground under an apple tree, we can conclude that it was once attached to the tree. By observing how trees grow, one can conclude how the tree grew there and that it was once not there, or that it will no longer be there at some point. In logical reasoning, and especially in Hermetic enlightenment, the chaos of waves does not structure itself into observed structures built up by the observation of arbitrary events, as in remembering, but it structures itself into an order that always was, always is, and always will be. Sometimes it seems to me that I actually have no control over what happens in my mind. I can only observe an algorithm that happens out of itself and on which my influence is rather small and an illusion. Waves on an ocean bouncing off rocks and forming patterns that overlap and influence each other. I used to think I was those patterns, but I am not. I am just a silent observer watching these waves pass by. I can also see in the patterns my future movements and structures. I can see in them that my mind will transform and transmute out of itself in certain directions. My perception and mental basis allows only certain directions and excludes other possibilities. Also, a standstill is excluded. The patterns and movements will move my mind to go out of itself more and more and to follow a different path that contradicts my previous self. For example, the realizations about the archetypal processes lead me to become displeased with remaining in a passive and introverted state permanently. Being silent is not an alternative because of my own moral basis and in the face of the mental decay of humanity. One day, conditions will cause my own will to make different choices. On the surface, it will seem as my mind is consciously restructuring itself. even that these are changes that result from an extremely high and conscious perspective on myself and life, it remains primarily a process of action and reaction that happens out of its own. My own decisions depend on a mental basis and my understanding of reality, which are in a constant process of transformation. Conditions change understanding and morality, which in turn changes action and conditions, which in turn changes understanding and moral choices through experience again. A constant process of a self-aligning algorithm. My mind changes through my will, but what my will wants is based on a mental basis that is primarily influenced by evolution, experience, and my understanding of reality. Waves in the ocean of mind that just pass by. The wave forms out of itself and out of the basis of past patterns, again and again new patterns. Through a higher understanding, one can make predictions about where decisions will lead, and one can compare and weight the possible path. In the end, it's all just a decision to avoid bad emotions. I know that I will not like many paths, but I also know that I would like to even less not go down them. I may not feel like making something to eat and sitting down and eat and drink, but I feel even less like being hungry and having headache in the future. Or that I regularly force myself to work on a game that I can't actually see myself working on anymore, because working on it has gotten annoying to me. I will still do it because I value the future where I finished it higher than the future where it's still not finished. If I could not see it that far into the future to understand it, I would not work on it and decide against it. If everything in the mental basis remained the same, only the rise of a higher understanding of the connections between past, present, and future would be enough to change the will and restructure and realign the mind through a cold process of action and reaction. These processes are valid as above so below. I say at the end of my polished theory of everything that we are moving towards an event, a knot point in the evolution of conscious life, the birth of a new species. A Genesis 2.0. I didn't come up with this sentence lightly, even when I mean it rationally in the highest sense. I know how crazy it will sound to most people, but that is quite normal. If it didn't sound crazy to most, it would mean that we had already gone through this collective second birth. The second Genesis is different from the first. In Genesis 1.0, it is a sin to eat the apple because life then falls into duality and moves away from God and the natural metaphysical unity. In Genesis 2.0, it is a sin not to eat the apple because otherwise life remains in duality and does not find its way back to God. According to Wikipedia, the formula of the philosopher's stone can be traced back not only to Plato, but also to Adam in Genesis. There is also the quote, "The first matter of the stone is the very same with the first matter of all things." All things, that is, everything. I find it very difficult to believe why it is so hard for many to realize that the philosopher's stone is a world formula for the theory of everything. The concepts of the stone can also be found on the national flag of South Korea, which in my subjective evaluation is the best national flag. 4 alchemical elements and the 2 essences of polarity. 42. I heard that in Kabbalism there are 2 trees. One has the divine fruit, which causes a spiritual rise. The other has a rotten fruit, which causes a spiritual downfall. That fits well to my theory of everything. The masses eat the rotten fruit of the false tree and inverted metaphysics. That's why we decay. It really annoys me so much that people are so stuck in their dual worldviews and can never allow the thought that there are highly rational truths about morality and religions. I expect that most people would say I'm crazy for this video because people are not able to admit that they don't understand everything. As soon as political morality is questioned, people are not open but very arrogant and dismissive. If I then also want to explain that because of this arrogance, the moral cycles are predictable like unconscious robots, then they feel attacked in their ego. People prefer to see their minds and evaluation as separate from natural laws. and prefer to see themselves as superior to nature. They have a lot of trouble to accept it as a part of it. We are not superior to nature. It all happens out of itself. The less a culture is aware of it, the easier it is to predict the behavior. Action and reaction. Just as the understanding of the consequences of the future moved me to behave differently in the now and I decide to work on my game against my emotions, so people will decide against duality and for polarity in the future. The mental base of the majority due to evolution points to polarity near the middle and to the desire to avoid the collective mental decay. The masses only get carried away by duality because of the lack of consciousness about the nature of reality and the consequences that arise when we move away from it. If the consciousness rises, then the will also changes. Not mystically, but in a logical process of action and reaction. The rise of a higher level of consciousness of a small group or culture is nothing new. The knowledge and the realizations about the eternal cycle of rise, aging, fall, death and rebirth of social orders was already often described but was mystified. There was little interest for many to deal with it. But as life moves further and further into duality, the contrast becomes greater and more obvious. It is becoming easier and easier to see, and the consequences of duality are becoming more and more troubling that people will look for something new to break out of it. No one can rewrite the laws of nature. No one can prevent that the conditions causing a global shift of worldviews. The more we fight against it, the more the conditions are created for it to happen. In the religions, this archetypal and rational event is already described. In Buddhism, there one compares this event with the udumbara flower. It is said that this event is so rare that it happens only once every 3,000 years.
Every sentient civilization across the galaxy eventually develops the same myth.
In Centauri, it's known as Tower Man. The Orionese have their Thornburg cycle, and in Andromeda, it's called foolish to have imagined you'd be able to kill.
All of them what you call die-hard.
The difference being that cultures like mine are aware of its importance, whereas I'm starting to doubt.
You can even recall a single line.
Walkie-talkie die hard, motherfucker.
What makes this time even more special is the global scale. There are conditions that it is the last time because it happens on a global synchronization and we are all connected through the internet. This time it will also not be passed on for hundreds of years by hearing and telling until it is finally written down, but it will be stored in real time, in so many places that it will be not enough for a library to burn as it did in Alexandria, so that many notes will be lost. Everything points to this one moment, but only a few are lucky enough to realize so early what is happening and what will happen. It is about highly rational events that were mystified because they were not understood. Reincarnation only appears impossible with a materialistic worldview which knows only bodies, but no minds or souls. But the one-sided materialistic worldview is wrong. We are all Buddhas, but most of us don't know it yet. The prophecies in the religions that could be made thousands of years ago are not based on mystical things, but on rational predictions that can be understood if one understands that conditions produce morality and morality changes conditions, which then changes morality again up to the one point of a collective awakening. The resurrection of the dead. Unconscious minds then become aware of their own nature. The NPC becomes a player character. All the undead are simultaneously brought to the realization of eternal life. The door back to Eden is so wide open that it is hard to miss. I cannot say when the sunrise will come. I can only say that it will happen. It is predictable as a whole, but chaotic in detail. It's like seeing a dead tree and knowing it is going to fall down in the next storm. You don't have to know exactly when the next storm is coming to know that it will be windy sooner or later. Or waking up at night when it's still dark and not knowing what time it is. Then one does not know exactly when the sun will rise. But one will always know that the dawn is unavoidable.